You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.
Hello, everybody. Jim here, and I'm going to give a shout out to my man, Trevitt, who sent me a message the other day, and he was upset over a recent interview that Ape did with Christopher Priest about his Black Adam limited series that just ended. It was an exit interview type deal, talking about some of the frustrations that Christopher Priest had while writing the Black Adam book. Now, the big play of this is that Christopher Priest is a well-known, highly respected writer and editor who's been in the industry for almost 50 years now. Most people will tell you that he wrote the best Black Panther run of all time, and he's done some things recently at DC like this Black Adam limited series, but also right now he's writing Superman Lost, but has done the Deathstroke book and Rebirth. He did a run on Justice League as well as a ton of other things. This isn't a new writer, is what I'm saying. This isn't somebody that's just, I wrote some of the scripts for Rick and Morty, and now they have me writing an issue of a comic. This is a well-respected writer, and also a writer that when you hire him, he will tell you exactly what he wants to do in a book. And if you don't want to go with that, he's fine to not do it. But also, you kind of get an idea of what you're going to get with Christopher Priest. If you hire him, he gets a little political. He does a little social stuff. But that's him, and his fans love it. And so that's why you hire him. But what happens with him here gives you an idea of what must be happening to people who don't have that resume that he has. You would think that he's getting a little bit of a special treatment because who he is. But what happens to everybody else that doesn't have that resume? And we've been talking on YouTube and our podcast and things about the idea of editors are more, writing stories nowadays. And these writers are being hired because they're cheap, but also because they can be told what to do. This gives a little more light into that, but it goes higher than just the editors. It even goes higher than just DC Comics. And I think that a lot of people, while some of this stuff will be not as shocking, you'll say, well, I can kind of get that happens. I think some people will get frustrated with what happened on this book with Christopher Priest and what is obviously happening at DC Comics and at Marvel as well. He kind of throws this in as a big two thing, but I'm going to link the full interview, as I said, in the description. But as it goes on, you end up having the interviewer ask about, how he ended up getting the book. And this is something that Christopher Priest talked about beforehand. I read some interviews where he said, when they asked him, will you do a Black Adam book? He said, okay, well, listen, here's what I want. I'm not going to deal with current continuity because I'm not reading anything and I don't want to. Oh, that's fine. Then he gave a list of things that he wanted to do if he wrote the Black Adam book. And he said some he didn't think they were going to do. But he said, if I'm not going to be able to do all of these things, then I'm not interested. I want to tell an interesting story that I want to tell. It's going to get political. It's going to do these things because what he saw in Black Adam and Conduct, this led to him thinking this could be a really cool political deal, all that stuff. So he writes his list. He hands it to DC. That's fine. You're on. Hey, sign on the dotted line. He's going to write the book. So this is the frustration of doing that. And then what happens? So the interviewer says, I know that when you were talking to your editor about this book, you kind of gave him all the reasons that you shouldn't get the comic because of some of the things you wanted to do. Christopher Priest responds, well, oddly enough, a lot of those things that I wanted to do that I thought I would not be allowed to do, I was actually allowed to do. So, okay, things are going great. Then he says, but then, there's always a but, right? I would get people in trouble. So something's not quite right. And he says the editors would sign off on it. But nowadays, both the major publishers are owned by these very big corporate interests. And they have this infrastructure in place where stuff goes above DC or outside of DC to get looked at. So it gets looked at by legal. It gets looked at by sensitivity people and so forth. Now, this is what I was saying earlier. I don't think that this is going to shock anybody. You kind of get the idea. Yeah, these things are in place. Legal would be something that should have always been there. But we're adding things on. Sensitivity people and so forth. And just as an aside here, when he's talking about this stuff, this seems like this is new to him. This is new now. He's been writing stuff at DC. He's been writing stuff at Marvel, but this seems like this isn't something that's been going on for 15 years, that this is something new that he's trying to explain. And he says, DC wasn't the problem. Let's put it that way. And to their credit, they fought to get a lot of stuff into that book that people above their heads wanted out. And they pushed back on it. And they fought for us and fought for the book. And I'm very grateful for that. All right, so they're pushing back. You have these things go out. I would think that what we're talking about, I don't think that you're going to push back on legal. If legal ends up saying, well, you're probably going to have to deal with that. What you're going to push back on, I think, are the sensitivity people. And probably because what sort of guidelines would you have? I mean, you end up where these people, and Priest will go on to say, mystery people. He has no idea. They don't know who these people are. They're not in the office. They haven't met them. So how many are there? What's going on? These gatekeepers that are telling you, no, we can't do this. And again, that term sensitivity people is going to get a lot of people riled up. And so what is allowed? What isn't? And it seems as if nobody knows. That's the biggest problem. You're writing a script and you have no idea. And then he goes on and says, I was starting to get people in trouble. It goes out of DC to mystery people, and it comes back with notes. So even to stop there, Christopher Priest has been writing comics for that long. It's a creative thing. And to send it out, wait, and then get it back with notes? I mean, is there anything worse to stop a creative process than to have to wait for somebody to give you little Post-it notes about what you can and can't write? I mean, that's crazy. Why isn't it just as a basic level? Why isn't it somebody that Christopher Priest then talks to and says, well, what about this? How about that? What about this? That doesn't seem to be in place. So what it does is end up frustrating the writer even more. So he says, so DC has approved it. We're fine. Editorial's fine. It's not DC. It's mystery people. And he understands that's their job, he says. Their job is to protect the bigger picture of the corporate interest, right? So we get these notes back. Now, again, the step aside, when you look at Priest and this Black Adam book, if you read it, even if you didn't, if he's talking about things that he got notes back on, why are some of these other books where it seems like characters are just being destroyed and things are being thrown, and really the idea that a lot of times it feels like the writers are laughing in your face, why aren't those things being stopped? You know, what is this deal? What is the guidelines to what is too sensitive, or what's this and that? And again, everybody listening to this, I think we all have our own ideas of what this can be, but that's the problem. We all have our own ideas because nobody knows, including a big writer like Christopher Priest. And so what does this do? What happens to somebody who's been in the industry that long and has written all these comics? What happens when you start getting notes back from mystery people that do sensitivity checks? This is what happens, he says. And what that does is after a while, it beats you down and you just go, all right, I'm just not going to go there anymore because it's tiring to have to fight City Hall. So you have a guy, whether you like him or not, you have a Christopher Priest who now has decided that I'm not even going to try to write the story that I came to write. I'm not even going to go into the whole idea. Now, it seems like at least some of the things he said they fought for. But is this going to get the inspiration for Christopher Priest to continue on? Now he's doing the Superman Lost book, but who knows when that was signed up for or whatnot. But as this goes on, what you're doing is beating down a well-respected writer. What does this do to newer writers? What does this do? And is this the reason why, and there's a lot of reasons, but is this one of the reasons why, say, Scott Snyder left, James Tynion left? They go to make their money in independent things. That's great because they own the characters. That's a huge part and probably one of the major things. But is it also that, hey, I don't even get to write my own stories here. I have to keep getting notes and things like that. That's horrible. And so he keeps going and he says, so I created this character who has those tonalities. And I think he's talking about Malik. And it's very difficult to have a character like that running around the DC universe. Not because of DC, but because DC is owned by a parent company that has interest and sensitivity. So you see, everybody now has to keep that in the back of their mind while writing stuff. So I think over the course of the book, you can feel me pulling back from those sensitive areas, even with the political stuff and things I wanted to explore. You start feeling me take a step back. Now, whether or not, we can say, well, I don't like his politics or whatnot, but is this why we get such generic surface level stuff and say a Tom Taylor book? Because that's what they allow. Well, you got to do more than that. But also, what is the sensitive deal? And why are some things that seem like really bad allowed, but then others, I don't know. And again, you're seeing a big writer saying, this sucks. It's not fun. It's not letting me do this. I'm sure at this point in his career, he's doing this just to get his creative outlet. And now it's being pushed back. So if we sit there and say, and a lot of people have said, well, why don't DC get this guy? Or why don't that girl? Or whatever. These big writers, this might be a major part of it. And it might be something that while it's going on, it may end up disappearing down there. This is something that if things start really crashing, maybe you have to pull back on that. But it's bad. But maybe you're going to end up having to kind of deal with this. And we're in this learning process of what goes on. But to me, what this does is it ends up forcing writers to write things they don't want to write in a way that they don't want to write it. And by the end, why even hire? This is, to me, just get Chat GPT AI, because if you're not going to let these people tell their own creative things, you're homogenizing everything. And basically for the end result will just be you'll have a cover and it'll say generic AI artist. I mean, this is bad. You're taking away people's creative outlet and creative process. And one of the things that really got me on this, and when Trevitt sent it to me, is that idea that this is something that we kind of have seen happening, especially at DC, especially since the end of death metal, in my mind. A lot of these writers where you sit there and say, where's the storytelling ability? Where is the setup? Where is, this? And it's even beyond just the nuts and bolts of writing a comic book. I'm talking just the creative storytelling. It doesn't seem to be there for a lot of these writers anymore. And what do you do? And so there are obviously some people like a Mark Waid that's able to work around this, but he works around it by having kind of a Silver Age feeling fun comic. There's nothing wrong. And I love it. But where is the differences going to come from? Where are you going to get more than just, as I said, a generic homogenized bunch of stories? Because it seems that there's mystery people that are more in charge of what we end up reading than anybody else, including the writers, the editors, DC themselves. That's scary and that's bad. But overall, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about this. Do you think this is something that you're like, hey, I could tell this was going on for a while. Hey, maybe it'll end up being good because it'll push some of the other nonsense out. I don't know. But let me know what you think in the comments. And yeah, we'll talk about it and see how this all works out. I'm a little scared about this overall, especially when it comes to getting bigger writers at DC. But let me know, and I will talk to you all later.
You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.